Welcome to Ames Public Library and to our Ames Historical Society lecture series, the 2019 lecture series. I'm just so delighted on behalf of the Ames Public Library to work again with the Ames Historical Society, our neighbors and partners from across the street, who bring really terrific programming ideas and speakers to us every year in the winter and spring. So I'm just delighted that you're all here. If any of you has an idea about a library program that you'd like to see occur in our building, feel free to contact me or submit a proposal on our website. We are always looking for new ideas. Of course, I know that all of you present are aware that the library's mission is to connect you to the world of ideas through diverse and inclusive resources and programs. And if you have any questions about what we're doing and want to come back for more programs, please pick up an issue of page 1, our monthly newsletter, so you will know everything that's happening at the library. If you would benefit from one of our hearing assist devices, I do have one available, and I'll have it in the back of the room, and I'd be happy to give that to you. And at this point, what I want to do is ask you to please join me in welcoming from the Ames Historical Society one of the staff over there who works behind the scenes to really make so many wonderful things happen. And that is Alex Pfeiffer of Ames Historical Society. Alex.
Thank you. Welcome to the program this evening. I'm Alex Pfeiffer, the Research and Exhibits Manager at the Ames Historical Society, and we are fortunate again to have the Ames Historical Society volunteer, Kathy Speck, organize this outstanding series of programs. Everybody give Kathy a round of applause. We are also very fortunate to be partnering with the Ames Public Library and the Ames Public Library Friends Foundation in presenting this lecture series, so we want to thank them also. And if you've not stopped yet, across the street at the Ames History Center there to see the current exhibit, Exploring Historic Ames, Unique Selections from the Farwell T. Brown Photographic Archive, I encourage you to do so. And that's not just because I'm the exhibits manager, it's a really great exhibit over there. It'll be up until August 3rd, so you still got a little bit of the summer yet to see it. And the History Center is open Tuesday through Saturday, 10 to 4. Also, we want to talk about our bonus lecture we have this year in our lecture series. Next week, Thursday, May 23rd at 7 p.m., Michael Lasser will be talking about American popular music from the 1920s to 1959 time period. And then after that, on June 26th, the story of annexation of the Morris Farm in Northwest Ames. That'll be very exciting. So we encourage you to come back and see us. We also want to recognize and thank those that are currently members of the Ames Historical Society. We couldn't do this without your support. Approximately 25% of our funding comes from members, so we really thank you, and I thank you for being members of the Historical Society. If you're not a member and you're interested in supporting our organization, we have some brochures available on our table over there by our sign-up, and right by the door prize. So while you're signing up for the door prize, you can become a member, and tonight win a copy of Steam Railroads of Northern Iowa and Southern Minnesota. We'll do the prize drawing at the end. And this time, we ask that if you haven't already turned off your cell phone, other electronic devices, please do so. And again, Mary said if there's anybody that would require a listening device, the library has that to provide. I will now turn it over to Kathy Speck to introduce our speaker.
We'll be hearing tonight from Linda McCann. And Linda researches and writes about Iowa history so that future generations of Iowans can learn about and enjoy our very unique stories. She researches topics and interviews people, and then she writes about what she has learned. She says, quote, "I have found that our younger generation is interested in history if we make it interesting to them. They need to learn about their ancestors, and they need to want to learn about them." Linda especially loves talking to children. She has traveled and spoken to hundreds of individuals and groups about the history and narratives of Iowa, both what is still here to photograph and research as well as what has been lost over time. Most of her research and books concern Iowa's Cedar Valley area, but with the newest books, she has expanded to other areas of the state. Now, interestingly, her background is nursing. But she developed an avid interest in history and found that she had a knack for research, genealogy, and copywriting and copy editing. She says that it was her grandchildren who were the catalyst for her writing. They always wanted to know more of the story, and she thought maybe she better write it down. She has had 30 books published so far, 8 of which have gone nationwide. They are available at iowanbooks.com. And lucky for us, she brought a selection of them here tonight for you to purchase and take home. So without further ado, Linda, let's hear the story.
Okay, am I on?
Yes.
Okay.
Can you hear?
Can I hear?
Yeah, go ahead.
Can you hear me? No. No? Oh. Okay, how's that? Okay, good. Well, we're going to try to make the PowerPoint work. I've never done one, so we'll see what goes with it. I am from Shell Rock, up north of Waterloo. Waverly Shell Rock School District. I didn't grow up there. So when we moved there, I actually got involved in genealogy and discovered I was descended from the founder of town. And my mother and my grandmother did not know this. So we'd lost that information in the family. So I was determined my daughters and now my grandkids knew this. Well, we started a historical society about 15 years ago. And I got elected president. And I'm still president. I gotta go home tomorrow to a meeting, and guess what? It's not high on my list right now. So, with that, I was also the person they were to bring things to donate to the museum. And people would come to my house and say, this is from Coster, this is from Butler Center. And I was kind of going, and why do we care about that? You know, we're a Shell Rock museum. Well, finally somebody told me these were the towns that weren't there anymore. So I actually did a book for the museum called Where Did They Go? And it was about 8 of these named locations around Shell Rock. Well, a publisher came to me, asked if we could turn this into a county-wide book, and could we have a series. So that's where things started. They planned to call these ghost towns. And I said, they're not ghost towns, they're hayfields and cornfields and cemeteries. So that's where the lost came from. And I say that every book after that, I just very much stumbled into, my grandkids want to know more, and I can't tell them it yet. So with the CCC, we had camped a lot, so I knew a lot about the state parks. Well, I was doing a newspaper interview in Waverly after my Prohibition book came out. And the reporter asked me what was my next book. And I said, well, I'm thinking of the POW camps or the CCC camps. His face was just blank. I had learned to wait. And he finally said, were the POW camps from the Civil War? And then he didn't know a thing about the CCC either. Well, Waverly had a POW camp. I grew up hearing about it. And so I explained to him the little bit I knew, and unfortunately, he's never written a story about the POW camp at Waverly. So, when I went to my publisher, who by that time was the Iowan, and I have to correct something Kathy said, not her fault, but mine. My publisher is now Tandem Publishing out of Des Moines. Tandem, T-A-N-D-E-M, I think. Something like that. So, anyway, when I went to my publisher, I was ready to do POW about 5 years ago. Well, she said, you know, if you're going to do CCC, you really should do that first because you've been going chronologically. I said, okay. We thought we would have 2 books. Well, again, there's always more out there than I know anyway. The Northeast book and the Southeast book is out. The Central book is at the publishers right now. I was hoping it would be ready for tonight, but it wasn't. I'm hoping by June, end of June. And then the Western book is at the proofreader, so there'll be 4 books on the CCC before I get done. I will tell you, I'm now working on Rosie the Riveter. Rosie the Riveter's from Iowa. And I've already spoke with about 25 ladies. And again, the stories they can tell are just unreal. You can't find those stories in a book. So I'm still looking for more ladies, any of this sort of stuff. So you come into any of the librarians, probably anywhere in the state, and they'll be able to connect you with me. So, okay, we'll go back to the CCC. Civilian Conservation Corps. Why did we need it? Well, these were the Depression years. And you can't see it real well on that sign, but the free coffee was for men only. Free coffee and meals. Because they were expected to be the ones that were earning a living. And you know, again, when I said this to a group of teenage girls, they just had a fit, you know, because they don't understand how different it was. Well, I know with this group, I don't have to explain the Depression much. I will point out that in 1919, Iowa farmers were being paid $5 a bushel for corn in 1919. If you take inflation with that, that would be like $75 a bushel now. So they were making good money. They bought tractors, they bought land, they built buildings. In 1923, they're being paid $0.25 a bushel for corn. And they can't pay their loans. So this is what just started the Depression in Iowa. Of course, they laid off all these young guys that had quit school to work for farmers. I don't know about you, but there were always young guys that quit school to work for farmers when I was in school, you know. So these guys were laid off and couldn't get another job. So that's really was the beginning of the Depression. And by the time, okay, this is good. I've kind of forgotten it. By the time FDR was elected in '32, these guys had literally grown up not having a full meal. And one of the guys I talked to said, I tried not to eat much because I wanted my little brothers to be able to eat. You know, just normal, yeah. So, does anybody know the 25-year plan? Good, there is at least one. Help me if I get confused. I had never heard of it. And as I began researching, I realized how important that was to Iowa's history. Our governor in 1930 was Daniel Webster Turner. And he could see we were headed for trouble. Half of our young men were leaving the state for jobs. And what was going to bring them back? Were they going to come back? So he put together what came to be called the 25-year conservation plan. They called it the 25-year plan because they thought it would take 25 years to accomplish it. As you can see, they did almost 7% of it during the CCC years. So, this plan is very exciting. Yeah, we got that too. This is kind of the highlights to the plan. Am I in the way? This is kind of the highlights to the plan. And you know, it's very wide-ranging. It's not just farming, it's not just recreation. I find it interesting that they wanted to build sewer systems. So they got the runoff out of the lakes and rivers. So this is the main events in the 25-year plan. This book is about this big, and a lot of it is taken up with trying to build state parks. They wanted to have 25 dams built in Iowa to create 25 lakes that we would then have state parks with those lakes. The CCC built 18 of them. Wow, you know? So, this just kind of gives you an overview of it. I will come back to this and you'll see why I get excited about it. Oh, sorry, we got more. So, FDR's elected in '32. within 2 weeks of being inaugurated in March of '33, he goes to Congress and spells out what he calls the Tree Army. He wants to have something to work with natural resources. And again, in 1930, when this 25-year plan was started, they claim Iowa had no forest. I have trouble with that every time I'm driving around the state, but think about it. The farmers cut the trees. They sure didn't plant more. They didn't want them. So evidently, much of the U.S. was without forest because FDR had done a tree army when he was governor of New York. So that's why he spelled out, okay, we got to pause. That's why he spelled out the Tree Army. Like I said, within 2 weeks of him being inaugurated, he goes to Congress, spells it out. Within 2 weeks of him going to Congress, it's back on his desk ready to be signed. Yeah, wow. Well, of course it was an emergency, all this sort of stuff. But, you know, they really jumped onto it. The first CCC camp opened in April 7th of '33. By the end of April, Iowa had 4 camps going. And that's where the 25-year plan comes in. When a town, when Ames wanted to have a camp, there were some guidelines they had to make. They first had to have a sponsor. Now here in Ames, the city of Ames sponsored the camps. But whatever town was applying, they had to have a sponsor. This sponsor was going to spend money to get the camp in town because they had to have land rented and it had to have water, sewer, and electricity, or the sponsor had to put it in. So the second thing they had to have before they could actually apply for a camp was a plan, something that the guys were going to do for their work. Well, that's where our 25-year plan comes in. All these plans are spelled out in the book. I'm going to talk about Backbone at Strawberry Point just because that's what's closest to me and that's what I'm familiar with. But it's the same for all over the state. They've got this spelled out. So over here at Backbone, they're talking about building the dam. This will create the lake. Going to build the boathouse. Going to build the bathhouse. Going to build the fish hatchery. Talks about the roads, the trails, the the auditorium, the ranger's house. All this is spelled out in it. Then it says, we are going to need 5,000 men to work 7 years to accomplish this. And that's exactly what the CCC guys worked at Backbone. They worked 5 years, 7,000 guys worked there, building Backbone. And like I said, every one of the state parks is like this. It's just spelled out like that. And it's really unreal to see this and then see it come to fruition. So, when I started researching, and again, this was up in the Northeast, we were thinking we were going to do an East book, but that didn't get done. It was too much info. So, I'm looking, I keep hearing about the erosion stuff, and I didn't know anything about soil erosion. All I knew about was the state parks. So I finally sent out newspaper releases to the papers. And that's what I do when I'm looking for information. I tell the librarians, I send news releases out. I got a phone call from Maquoketa. The guy says to me, do you want to see a flume, F-L-U-M-E, built by the CCC? I didn't know what it was, but I said yes. Well, he says to me, you can't tell anyone where it's at. Okay, you know. So as I'm driving over there, and it's a couple hours for me, I'm thinking, this could be the stupidest thing you ever did. So when I got to Maquoketa, I went to the museum because I knew the person there. And I said, do you want to go see a flume? And she said yes. All I had was an address, and right now all I can tell you was that it was east of town. I'm not sure I could even find it. So we went to this address. She knew the guys that were waiting for us, so okay. They put us in a pickup truck. And if you would have asked me how far we drove, I would have said we drove 20 miles off-road and never crossed the street. You know? And I know you can't do that in Iowa, but we were up and down and we were round and round, and then we're crossing a pasture and opening and closing gates. Do I have a flume picture? Sorry. No. So, we get back there, and a flume is a series of steps. This one was 8 foot tall. And we're in a valley, and all around us are cornfields. And I'm kind of standing there going, I don't understand how this works. Well, one of the guys there was explaining it, and it drained the water off the cornfields down into this creek. And he said, this creek has been taller than the flume, 8 feet deep, because of the drainage. And then he said, we wouldn't have had a crop many years without this. So we get done, we get ready to leave. They of course say to us, don't tell anyone where this was at. Okay, you know what we talked about all the way back to town. Well, I get home, I get a phone call from the guy with the Ccc Dam. He says, do you want a picture of a dam built by the CCC? I said, can I come see it? He said, no. I said, okay, I'll take a picture. And I actually asked him to go back and wash this up better so it could be readable. The CCC plaque on the dam. Well, when I got ready to put it into the book, I contacted him again. All I had was email. I didn't have his name. So I sent him a message and I said, how am I supposed to describe where this dam is? He says, near Ccc. Well, of course, when I went to Ccc to speak, all these people were poring over these pictures. They never did figure out where it was. Okay, one more. I went up to McGregor. It was soil erosion, drought prevention, flood control, planting trees. That was what it was all about. So up at McGregor, they did a big flood control project. Well, one of my cousins is a council person up there, so I got to go under the road and stuff to see it. She, of course, complained because now it's on the National Register of Historic Places, so they probably won't get to replace it, that sort of thing. So I'm speaking at the McGregor Library that night. A guy comes in and gives me some pictures. And I say, can I go and see this? No. Well, when he left, another guy said to me, you do know why he wouldn't let you come, don't you? I said, no. He said, all of this work is on private land, and they're afraid of vandals. Makes sense, yeah. So, 75% of the work done in Iowa by the CCC was erosion control. 75% of the work done we don't see. And how much of it is gone? There was a camp in Marion, right downtown Marion. They worked on all the hills around the town. I'm sure when they built the houses that are there now, contractors just bulldozed everything. So think of all the state park stuff and that's less than 25% of their work. That just continues to astonish me that I didn't know about this erosion control stuff. Of our first 4 camps, 2 were erosion control, 2 were state parks. So this is a Ccc Dam at Lakokota. And again, it's just, something that they had. Oh, that's the plaque on it, yeah. Sorry. Again, in the western part of the state, they did a lot with these gullies. And out there, they know about it. The western part of the state knows about it. When I did the Southeast book, nobody admitted to knowing anything down there. When I did the Central book, down around Lamoni, they had a big wetlands project. And I can read about it in the newspaper, but I can't find it. I went down, I tried to find it, I tried to ask people. Again, nobody knows anything about it, you know. So again, we've just got, people are afraid of it. I'm going to back up just because I'm getting ahead of myself, or I'm getting behind myself. So, when we start the 4 camps, in the beginning, this was only a 6-month project. Somebody in DC said that the depression's going to be over by the end of the year. We only need this to get through that. Yeah. So this was a 6-month project. So the guys very much lived in tents. It was just catch as catch can, that sort of thing. Now when they went to join up, now they like the term enrolled. The guys I talked to did not join, they enrolled. I said, why? They said if we joined, they could tell us what to do. If we enrolled, we could leave when we wanted to. Yeah. So, when they went to enroll, they had to be 17 to 23, unmarried, unemployed, and living at home. That was the first stipulations for them joining, enrolling. So, each county had a quota of how many guys they could take. Iowa's quota was 5,000 men. And like I say, it's by population. Waverly, Bremer County was 20. So Story County, yeah, that's where I'm at. Story County would have been more. So they figure about 4 times the amount they were allowed showed up. I mean, you know, these guys needed jobs. Their families needed the help. About 10% of them were sent home because they were ill. Tuberculosis was rampant. And, you know, these guys are only going to spend 2 weeks and they're going to be out working. So they pick their guys. They come down here to Fort Des Moines. They get shots. They get uniforms. They get to eat. And that's about it. The Army was in charge and couldn't believe how much these guys were eating. You know? And again, how long had it been since they'd had a full meal? So, at the end of 2 weeks, they're out to these 4 camps. And they go right to work. And like I said, the big part of it was the erosion control. Well, one of the guys said to me one day, the towns didn't want us. I said, what? I thought they wanted you. He goes, well, they wanted the camp. They didn't want us. I was still slow. Finally, he goes, the parents of girls didn't want us. Oh, okay, I gotcha. A lot of these camps were in fairgrounds, right on the edge of town. These guys were done working at 5 o'clock in the afternoon. They had to put a tie on to get supper. They could not get supper if they didn't have their tie on. And believe me, they're still talking about this, still complaining about this. So as soon as they had supper, they were free till 10 o'clock at night. Guess what they wanted to do? Go to town. Well, this is where the camps figured out, oh, we can play ball, all this sort of stuff. So that's the first thing they started was softball, kitten ball, eventually into boxing and this sort of stuff. The second thing they figured out was most of these guys are functionally illiterate. You know, one of the guys I talked to quit school at 2nd grade. He thought he could help his family. So they really went to work, reading, writing, and arithmetic. Simple as that. And that's how they killed the summer, trying to keep them into camp. Well, of course, come August, they knew they weren't finished. The Depression wasn't over. Congress extended it 2 years, and then they continued to extend it 2 years after that. So the first project was building barracks for the winter, and they built 4 barracks. By the end of summer, we had 12 camps in Iowa, 200 guys at each camp. and about 50 military at each camp. Yeah, I can understand why they didn't want the guys in town, you know. So, they built 4 camps with barracks. The rest of them went back to Fort Des Moines for the winter. And already this winter of 33, they had plans for 3 forest nurseries in Iowa. So the guys at Camp Des Moines are picking up nuts. They're going to start the trees from nuts. And they did. That became a real big part of what went on. One day, one of the guys I was talking to said to me, "How do you think we planted trees?" I said, "With a shovel?" He goes, "We stood in a line arm length apart." He said, "There were 40 in the line. First tree went right here. We take 2 steps, check the line, there's our second tree." He said, "We did that for 8 hours a day, day after day after day." They estimate 3 billion trees were planted in Iowa by the CCC guys. And they told me, whenever you see these lime trees, they probably planted them by the CCC. Nationwide, they estimate 30 billion trees were planted. And most of these trees came out of the Ames, Keosauqua, or Yellow River State Forest nurseries. They started them from nuts. Now, through that first winter, there were a few things they had to iron out. The first thing was, Mrs. Roosevelt went to FDR and said, the girls, we have families with no boys. They only have girls. What are we going to do for them? FDR issued an executive order starting the she camps. Isn't that almost too cute? We didn't have any camps here. Our women were given bus tickets and sent to the East Coast. The East Coast had the camps. Now, again, set up just like the CCC camp. They wore uniforms. They were paid exactly the same as the men, $30 a month. 25 went home to their families. And the guys told me they got $5 silver. They had stuff the women had stuff they had to do. They did typing, secretarial, nursing, first aid, I'm forgetting one, and planting trees. So they did these. The only thing different, the men could be in 2 years. The women could only be in 6 months. And I don't know why. To me, the interesting thing is a lot of the Indian women out of South Dakota figured out they could get out there. And think how they helped their families and then got this training. Well, Congress didn't like this plan, this program, and they eventually sent somebody to investigate it. The person reported back, the women are on vacation with our tax dollars. And so it was closed. 8,500 women went through it in 4 years. 8,500 families were helped by it. The second problem that they had run into already in this first summer was a racial issue. FDR had said there would be no segregation, and it's written in the law. But again, it's the 30s, and especially down south. And so they had tried putting them in separate barracks. They had tried separate work projects. Nothing worked. I do find it interesting that our white men tolerated the Latinos, but they didn't the blacks. Again, I don't know. So they started black camps. We had one up at Lakeview, north central Iowa. Now, Keosauqua was supposed to get a camp. They had about 4 or 5 camps going on at the time, and they needed another camp. They just had so much going on. Somehow the word got around it was going to be a black camp. And the letters to the editor are truly unreal. I mean, I just couldn't believe them. I said to my publisher, we can't print the letters. She said, "Oh, I can't believe that. Send them to me." I sent them to her. She said, We can't print the letters. So Keosauqua did not get their camp, and they lost another one within 6 months. I don't know if they're related or not, but the other thing was an Indian camp, and we did have one at Tama. And again, they lived on their reservation, they worked on it, they planted a pine forest, they did all kinds of erosion control, this sort of stuff. So, going into the spring of '44, we're up to 20 camps in Iowa. And like I said, we've got 200 guys at each camp, and they're just functioning well. Every camp had a number, and every camp had their symbol, this sort of thing. I think this is a McGregor camp. And, oh, this is a McGregor's token. They had a canteen where they could buy tokens at half price. And you know, they bought everything from shavers to candy bars and who knows what else, you know. So, and these things are both very collectible. And that's a Sheraton token. They all wore tags, dog tags, and after about 26, every one of them was fingerprinted. Because again, they had learned they needed to have a way to tell who was who, and they'd had some deaths and stuff. Each camp had like its own matchbook sort of thing. And it's just really funny what's out there. These are just logos that were used in advertising. And the U.S. very much advertised to get people into it. In the beginning, there was a shortage. Everybody couldn't get in. By the late 30s, they were asking, searching for men. Now in Iowa, in the beginning, we got guys from Illinois because they didn't have any plan to do their work. So we got to have our 5,000 guys, and then we got to have Illinois, whatever they sent to us. So to me, that was great. After the late 30s, we actually got guys from Arkansas, Missouri, and Kansas. Again, because they didn't have all these projects. You can see, after about 34, they start putting up prefab buildings. So the buildings could go up virtually in a weekend and come down in a weekend. The plan was that the buildings were not going to be destroyed. And these are just various pictures of the different camps. This is a beach house built by the guys at Backbone. And this is Bedford up in North Central. They were a drainage control camp. Sheraton was real big with forestry. This is a camp out of Coralville. And they were the only camp, supposedly, in the U.S. that started and never moved. Now, most of these, like Backbone, had 7 years to do their projects. Then they closed, unless somebody got on the stick and got more. But a lot of these camps closed down, and then the people would come back and reopen them for something. This Coralville camp never closed. It was going the whole time. They were working on McBride and the one on Highway 30 by Mount Vernon. Palisades, right. Thank you. Again, just various pictures, various barracks. The guys were very impressed with where they were living. The guy at Backbone that I talked to, he had actually, again, they built the Legis sign. He was a junior in high school. He had finished his junior year. His dad died. He wanted to finish high school, but he had to do something to support the family. So he made an agreement with the camp at Strawberry Point that he would work nights and weekends and he could go to school during the day. And he did finish high school. So one day I was talking to him and I said to him, "Did you take extra classes at night?" "No." I said, "Did you play ball?" "No." "So what did you do at night?" He goes, "I did laundry." That's another thing the guys complained about. Of course, they left home at 17 or 18 and they had to begin doing their own laundry. At Backbone, they had one washing machine for 200 guys. And of course, it's an old ringer type. And so he said, it could take you all week to get your clothes done, and then you had to start over. Well, this guy was very good about giving me ideas for more questions. So one day I get a phone call at home from a lady at Eldora, Pine Lake. And she said, she starts the conversation saying, my mom and dad met through laundry. Well, she had my attention, yeah. So these are the steps that ledges. And again, they built them. So she says, at Pine Lake, at Eldora, the women of Steamboat Rock figured out they could make some money doing laundry. So for 50 cents a month, they would come and get the laundry, take it home, wash it, dry it, probably iron it, and their teenage daughters took it back to camp. Talk about ulterior motives, huh? Well, then I talked with a 107-year-old man. And it was interesting because he was hard of hearing and his wife kept trying to interpret. Anyway, I said to him, how did you do laundry? And he mumbled something. I was debating if I wanted to pursue it or drop it. Well, she asked him. He said, I said we took showers. Well, I'm still confused. He explained he was at Sheraton. No, he was at Shenandoah. They had one washboard for 200 guys. And the only place they had to use it was the bathroom sink. So he said, we figured out we could take showers with our clothes on, rinse them out, take them out. Well, my grandson was 5 years old at the time I got this info. And I, of course, was sharing it with his older sisters. He picks up on it and he goes, why didn't they just go outdoors and stand in the rain? I didn't get into the drought years with him. So, see how things changed over time and advanced? The other thing I really noticed it in was the education thing. Like I said, in the beginning, reading, writing, arithmetic. By the mid-30s, the guys told me they could pretty well get whatever they wanted. The CCC wanted them to learn a trade, so it was welding, electronics, auto mechanics. They said if we asked for something, they would try to find somebody to teach it, or they'd send us somewhere that had it. I mean, they really wanted these guys to learn a trade. By the late 30s, it's changed again. It's gunsmithing, radio repair, radar. Yeah, we're preparing for war. And again, wow, somebody really was thinking ahead there. So, this is Pilot Knob up north, almost to the border. The CCC guys built it. And they built with a wheelbarrow and a shovel. They did not have any kind of power equipment, any of this stuff. If they got to a stage they needed some of that, the WPA would come in and help them out. But mostly it's them just plain figuring out ways to do it. And there's the finished product. It's fantastic. Somebody asked me about that one. Like I said, it's virtually, and down there, this was an entrance to their camp, and it was lit. And the guys told me that when they left town, they looked for this light, and if they could see it, they could get their way home. You know, because they might be lit. So, and this is the tunnel there at Pommel. So, again, it's just to think they're doing all of this with nothing to help them. This is the Knoxville Camp. So, things are going along, things are going well. Like I said, we're having trouble making our quotas because the guys had learned that if they got this discharge paper from the CCC, they virtually went to the head of the hiring list. They had proven themselves. And actually, in the beginning, those things were really collected by families. And I hear they're still on eBay at times. Now, if you had somebody in the CCC, you can still get their discharge papers. And come and talk to me, I'll tell you the address and how to get about it. But it'll cost you $75, but the papers are wonderful. It's got information you wouldn't see otherwise. So that's a big part of why we had to bring the guys from out of state, because our guys were staying in there 2 years and then getting out with these discharge papers. So, like I said, they worked all over the state. They worked in all the state parks. They built 18 dams and then the state parks to go with them. All total, they worked in 84 parks in the state. And this is state, county, and city parks they worked in. And most of these camps, yeah, isn't that something?
Yeah.
That's the only place that has something like that, at least in Iowa. Most of these parks are on the National Register of Historic Places. To my knowledge, Ledges is the only place that is not on that. And the ranger there wants to get it on it, but he can't convince his friends group to do it. But, you know, being on the National Register protects these buildings. So stuff isn't going to happen to them if they get destroyed or whatever. So, yeah, the buildings still are fantastic. Don't you love the sign? And there were some incidents of CCC guys getting shot during hunting season and stuff. And so this was what they posted to make people aware of it. So, again, you can see the wheelbarrow and all that sort of thing. Well, by the late 30s, we're having trouble getting the guys, and everybody knows the war is coming. Down in the south, they have these markers for the Mormon Trail, and they really did the research to figure out where the Mormons went across down there. I'm going to pause. I don't remember what's after that. Okay. Help me remember to come back to the Eldora one. Like I said, it's pretty well all over the state, but remember, this is only 25% of the work they did. And, you know, that still just continues to astound me. They did a lot of work with the Makokata Caves. And again, they hadn't really been into them that much. So by the late 30s, they know the war is coming. In fact, they were actually drafting guys out of the CCC camps. The guys went to CCC camp, and the parents would get letters that their son was now in the army, you know, that sort of thing. There's the camp from Coralville that stayed in the same location all the time. Now, this Ccc statue is at Keosauqua. When this book came out a year ago, the statue had been taken and melted down for the metal. They did get the guys, but not before the statue had been melted. But they do have a new one up in its place now. And again, it's fantastic to see. This is just a stamp, you know, with all the New Deal programs. I have put an appendix in the back of each of the books because there's so much going on, WPA, CWA, all of this sort of stuff. So each of the books have what went on in that location. Can you back me up to the Eldora one or not? Or you need this?
Hit up.
Yeah. So, like I said, by the late 30s, everybody knows we're going to war. Well, of course, Pearl Harbor kind of woke everybody up, ended everything, and the CCC did close July 1st, 1942. It was to go to 43, but these guys were going in the military. Something like 98-99% of the CCC guys went in the military. Now, the WPA and some of them went on longer because they were older guys. They weren't going into the military, but the CCC was. So as they're closing camps, as they're consolidating, from the very beginning, they were not to destroy these buildings. They were to be saved, that sort of thing. The Bancroft Camp and the Belle Plaine Camp were prefab buildings. The military came in, completely took them apart, put them on a train, and they went up on the Alaskan Highway. So the people that built the Alaskan Highway lived in buildings from Iowa. Yeah. A lot of our buildings went over around Sac at Omaha. A lot of the buildings ended up on college campuses, that sort of thing. Several places, the cities would get a building or two because they needed them for something. They really were trying to reuse them. This building is the only one still standing, and it's at Eldora. About 15 years ago, a woman and her daughter realized we've got to preserve this. This was then used for a POW camp. And so they preserved this. It's now the Ccc Pows Museum. And again, they've done a fantastic job. If you're looking for someplace different to go, it's worth the trip. And if by chance you had somebody that was in the Ccc from Eldora, they may have paperwork and some of this on them. They're very much trying to collect the stuff from the Eldora Ccc guys. So, but like I say, this is the only Ccc POW building standing. So, you know, I am just in awe at what they did, how they handled it, all this sort of thing. And to me, I just can't get over how, you can turn it off if you want, how far-reaching, how forward-thinking they were, you know. They were really thinking ahead to think, we got to get these guys an education and training and this sort of stuff. Well, like I said, I talked with 21 guys, and again, the stories they can tell me are just unreal. This guy from Strawberry Point one day said to me, we didn't know what a banana was. And again, you know, I'm kind of trying to catch up all this. He goes, imagine 200 guys going, what do we do with this? He said, they showed us how to peel it. And he said, the guy's standing there like this, and he goes, think about it. They're telling us to put this naked banana in our mouth. Well, he wasn't a big banana fan, as you can tell. But again, it was more stories to ask the others. I asked this 107-year-old guy about it. When did you have your first banana? You could just see he was thinking about it. He goes, I guess I was very fortunate. We lived behind the grocery store, and we went through the garbage every night. You know? Well, I was up here at Riceville, up north, and I was able to get into high school and talk about this. And I had learned this banana thing really got their attention and all of that. So, as we're talking, I say, listen, you guys need to talk to your great-grandparents. Not your grandparents, your great-grandparents. If you don't know what to talk to them about, ask them when they had their first banana. And turn your phone on, because you're going to hear stories you never heard before. Well, you know, I left and I thought, okay, who knows, that sort of thing. That night I was at the Riceville Library, and a lady comes through the doors, and she's headed right for me. And I literally was backing up away from her. And she's just a little lady, but you know, because people really have taken certain things really strange and that. So she comes up right here and stops. And she goes, my great-grandson called me today because you told him to. He's coming over tomorrow so we can talk. You all have great-grandchildren or grandchildren that need to hear your stories. I haven't told all mine either, but we all have to share this stuff. I had a dozen teenage girls in my house one afternoon. I had to quit feeding them. It came after early outs and then they would eat cookies. But they're sitting there. My granddaughters will say to me, "What's new, Grandma? What have you learned this week, Grandma?" That sort of thing. I was telling them about the CCC. Well, I had to tell them about the Depression first because I didn't know about the Depression. So I'm telling them, and I'm telling them about Beads Lake and Strawberry Point, the ones they're familiar with. And I might have got a little heavy, but I'm telling them these guys did their work with a shovel and a wheelbarrow. Well, I finally said to them, "Would you guys do this?" And I expected, no, I didn't get that. They thought about it. One by one, they kind of went, "I don't think so." Well, my granddaughters have this little brother. I said to them, "Caden's starving." They went, "Yes." Well, then the other girls did. "Oh, if my mother, if my brother, if whatever." They're going to do just like these guys did. If their family needs them to do it, they're going to do it. Well, we got to tell them our stories so they know more of this stuff. And believe me, they are interested. Anywhere I've been with them, they're completely involved and they're listening. So think about it. What do you want them to know about you? What haven't you told them? And you're going to think you told them because I know I took my daughters to the POW camp. And they're telling me I didn't. So we got one we're going around about. But they're going to, talk to them. Okay, I'm going to pause, see if you have questions or comments. Yeah. A lot of them were the WPA or teachers that had been laid off, because the teachers were laid off during the Depression. So it was either WPA or just plain teachers that had been laid off. Yeah.
Linda,
After this lecture, are we officially enrolled?
Well, unless you want to join.
I have a microphone so we can.
Okay.
Don't mind. Yeah. Try to speak into that so everybody can hear you.
Linda, all these buildings, everything they built was fantastically built, and it has lasted all these years. Who designed the buildings?
It was actually, I talked with a guy that had been in charge down in southeast Iowa, and he said to me, "Why do you think we use the natural items?" And I got off, I was saying, "Oh, I think it's wonderful, I just love it, He goes, "No, why did we use that?" I said, "I don't know." He goes, "They gave us all these plans for what we were supposed to do, and we had no money. So we had to use the trees when we cut them down. We had to use the rocks." Now, a year or two into it, they did get money for this stuff. But people had went so wild with this design, and it was actually a group, I really think it was out of Ames, that was real big with coming up with the designs. And, they won some awards for it and such. So, yeah.
What about the stonemasons and this kind of thing? Was that WPA?
No, they did their own stonework with the CCC.
Somebody had to teach them.
Yeah, every group that was out working had foremen. And they were local experienced men is what they were called, LEM. They were usually locals, and they didn't live on the camp, but they were the foreman for whatever project. And again, they taught a lot of people to be stonemasons and carpenters and all this, so.
Linda, you had a slide of Lake Laverne here in Ames.
Well, yeah.
And do you know specifically what they did at Lake Laverne? And are there any other CCC projects in Ames, in and around Ames?
Yeah. Okay. Like I said, the central book hopefully will be out this summer. The first camp began in May of '35. It was SCS, so that's Soil Conservation, number 14, Company 780. The camp was 3 miles west of on Highway 30. I thought I have to get under the lights. On North Ridgewood Avenue, okay? And this camp mainly, thank you, worked in the nurseries that they were beginning here. In May of 35, they announced that Iowa had 6 million trees to plant this spring, most of them from the Ames nursery. This camp closed and moved in October of 35, so it was just a summer camp, so it was probably just tents. Later, they built a building there. Then camp number S103, and I think this was a forestry one, company 709 came in April of 37, and they were in the same location. And that one worked till the end of the Ccc 42. That one worked at Ledges for a big part of it. They worked at the college nursery, and they did work with a pond, the lake here. Again, in the spring of 38, they had 750,000 one-year-old seedlings from the nursery here in Ames that they sent out through the state. They also worked to develop a game farm adjacent to Ledges and built a retaining wall at Ledges on the Des Moines River. And in 1940, they began working in the Boone County farms. And again, this was with the private farmers. Now, those farmers were real slow to get involved in that because they had to furnish the money for the materials. The labor was by the Ccc guys. Well, after it got going and the farmers saw how well it was doing, they estimated the cost was 5 cents an acre. Yeah. All the buildings were purchased by the State Board of Education for ISC, Iowa State College at that time. They paid $1,500 for that, for 28 buildings. Half the buildings were moved to Iowa State and half to Crystal Lake. Now, this group also worked with the state recreation area, and that began in 35 with replacing trees. They removed 4,000 trees and planted 5,000 more. There was a real problem in the state with trees that had diseases, and they had to get them out first. They used 800 truckloads of sod on the hills. Then they also worked on the golf course, Vinegar. Yeah. The CCC guys and the WPA built that one. So there were at least 3 different camps here in Ames. And you know, again, they're just getting the guys from all over and this sort of thing. Yeah.
I want to just remind people, the 3 miles west on Highway 30, that is Franklin Park today,
Okay.
if you're not from the location.
Okay. Yeah.
My grandparents lived on the east side of Grand Avenue, just south of 18th Street. That was the very northern border of the city at the time. They owned 5 acres behind the house, and the CCC planted walnut trees in rows, just as you described. Today, that 5 acres is full of houses on a cul-de-sac called Durrell Circle, and some of those walnut trees are still there.
Yeah. In the beginning, they planted locust trees. And when I first saw that, I went, why did they plant locust trees? Well, I guess they're quick growing and their roots, they planted these on farms to hold the soil, you know, after they'd done erosion work and this sort of stuff. Yeah.
Do they have any kind of physical requirement before they could join?
Yeah. They had to go through a physical, and that's where I say at least 10% of them were sent home, because they just weren't able. Now, there is an article somewhere, I can't tell you at what camp, where a guy came to join. After a year or so, they went right to the camp to join, and most of them went to their local camp. This guy went to his camp and he was too underweight. So somebody invited him to stay for lunch. So he had lunch, and then he was weighed again, and he met the requirements. Yeah,
Could you please clarify the difference in the relationship between the CCC and WPA?
okay. The CCC was just the young guys, and they very much lived away from home. In the beginning, a lot of the guys from the East Coast ended up in the Rockies, because again, the East Coast had no projects, whereas the Rockies had plenty of them. The WPA were mostly World War I vets, so they were the older guys. And the WPA stayed at their own homes, worked on projects locally. The WPA mostly was swimming pools, schools, and post offices. And they worked pretty much in their own communities doing that. And like I say, there's like CWA and PWA and all these others too. Somebody else?
So you've clearly interviewed a lot of people and gotten firsthand stories. What other sorts of records are available for this, and where did you get all your photographs?
Well, a lot of the photographs are just plain looking through the internet, and for whatever reason somebody's put them up, you know. There is a group called Ccc Legacy, and it's a nationwide group. They do have a Facebook page if you're interested. Well, they have taken the time to really catalog the companies, where they were at, what they were doing, that sort of stuff. So that's where I went first to get my basic where do I start. Then I spent a lot of time in old newspapers because again, this is prime sources, you know. This is happening as they talk about it. And I did find some dates that didn't jive with the legacy and some of this stuff. But again, you get the personal touches there. You get the personal stories and such. And then the DNR here in Iowa has really, about 10, 12 years ago, had a big project to find these guys and interview them. And again, there's a lot that were done. So it's just kind of stumbling wherever. Yeah.
Did you say that 28 of the barracks type buildings were here in Ames?
Yeah.
Does anybody know, is that what Camel Court was?
You guys know more than I do about that, so.
When they were finished with them? That's what I'm talking, when they were done with them. She said 28 of the
Buildings.
buildings were moved here.
Half went to Iowa State and half to Crystal Lake.
So that's what I was wondering if
I think most of the ones going to Iowa State went to the Ag Department and were used. And I doubt any of them are still around.
no, but the Camel Court was just torn down in the last, within the last 30 years.
Okay.
They lasted far longer than sort of.
It's possible that those CCC structures went to college farms
Yeah.
and various agricultural things. That's a possibility, but Camel Corps were military World War II surplus. Which one?
Building O.
Building O.
That was where, over near physics, it was a drawing building.
Okay.
And then there was a museum just west of Beard Cheer that looked like it was one of these kind of buildings. It was a little museum for a while.
Yeah.
Wasn't it the WPA that was behind the art projects too at Iowa State?
The WPA and the Treasury Department both had art projects that did the murals. And again, to me, FDR said he did not want the artists or the authors having to take regular jobs. He wanted them to pursue their passion, their knowledge. And so to think again, we're in the middle of the war and we're headed toward war and he's thinking this way. But Grant Wood did a lot of the murals down here, you know. And again, and where I can, this is all listed in the appendix, so you might recognize some names I didn't.
We're going to do the door prize drawing. Linda, you want to stir these up and fill out a name?
Oh, some scribbled, or some scrunched them up. Lori Oak.
Lori, are you
Well, I do have books for sale. I will sign them tonight. Do you have anything else?
I think that's it. We hope to see you at the next lecture, and let's give Linda a big round of applause.